What's up guys, Shawnthebro here, and in today's episode of the fighting game tutorial series, we are going to be going over air resets and advanced air combat. So air resets are the process of hitting an opponent while they're in the air and giving them time to reset. Usually they do a little flip and then become invulnerable. That's exactly what we're going to be covering today, so I'll show you an example when we get into the match here. So if I come over to my opponent, and I hit them into the air, and then I hit them with another move, they can do a little flip and reset. When they land on the ground, they will go back to their normal state. During this little flip, they get a few forces applied to them, so they go up and to the right, but then they also become invulnerable so that I cannot hit them with another attack while in the air. This allows them to land on their feet instead of just going from the launch to knockdown like usual, and can change how the actual fight progresses from there. That's what we're going to be covering today, so let's hop right into it. This is a code and blueprint tutorial, so we're going to start in the code today. Specifically, we want to go to our fighter template character.h file. Now, in the fighter template character.h, we have the character state and the combo state. The combo state is what combo we're in, so if we're launched, if we are recovering, if we're being knocked down, and I put air reset in here as one of those because I consider that part of the combo state. Since once you reach this state, you can't really get out of it until you land on the ground, or if you press some sort of special action that your character has to exit it. The air reset is really meant to be a recovery move from being attacked while in the air. So in the E combo state enum, I've added a new state called E_air reset, and I gave it a name of air reset in the blueprint, so when we access it, we will see it like this. Once we've added that E combo state, we're going to want to make sure that we add the ability to enter this state from the take damage function. Because what happens is once the character is launched, if they take damage from certain moves, they will then go into the air reset. So it's always when taking damage. Thus, the take damage function needs to know when to do this. So we can scroll down to our take damage function. We have our long list of parameters here. We want to scroll over. And I scrolled over to right here, pretty much toward the end, and I added this boolean, should cause air reset, and I defaulted it to false. So by default, moves will not cause air reset. But for any that should, we will obviously assign this to true, and then we can trigger it. Remember that defaulting it to false just means that if we don't give a value to this parameter in this function, then it will automatically be false, so we will just assume we don't want to trigger air reset. Also remember that optional parameters such as this have to appear at the end of the list. It doesn't matter their order once you get to the optional parameters, but you can't put a non-optional parameter after an optional parameter or it won't work. And now that is our take damage function. So for now we are good to go into the fighter template character.cpp and scroll down to the take damage function. At this point we'll want to make sure that we update it to match what we had in the .h file. Here's my take damage function. So in here, I want to add my should air reset, should cause air reset. Make sure you put it in the same spot that you did in the header file. So bool should cause air reset right here. And once we do that, the take damage function can now use that parameter to determine if we should send the character into the air reset combo state. Now, to actually set that value when calling this function, we need to know if the specific hitbox that hit the player should cause air reset. You could make it more generic and make it every attack that doesn't have launch causes you to go into air reset, or you could make it move specific. As usual throughout this series, I like to make it move specific, so I go to my hitbox actor.h. And when we're in here, I want to make a variable on the hitbox that determines if we can cause air reset when this hitbox lands. So let's scroll down to our hitbox data structure. And I'm scrolling down to my should cause variables, and I've added should air reset. Should probably be should cause air reset. So for consistency, let's say should cause air reset. But whatever you call it, it's just a boolean, should cause air reset. And it's a U property of edit anywhere blueprint read write with a category of hitbox. This way we can see it in the blueprint and access it on this hitbox when we want to set parameters or pass this data along using something like a data table. As long as we have that variable in there, we are good to go. We don't have to set it in the constructor or anything like that because it is part of the structure in the hitbox actor class. Now we can go back to fighter-template-character.cpp, go to the take damage function, and let's take a look at where we want to actually add this behavior. So we have a ton going on in take damage at this point in the series. First thing we check for is make sure we're in the correct game state. That way we know the round or the match isn't over. Then we make sure that the character is not currently in a super, since supers are special cases and they can be cinematic events and they don't have to follow the same rules that the rest of the fight does. Then we check and make sure the character was not able to block the attack at all. If they're not able to block the attack, we check for things like counter hit. So it doesn't matter if it's counter hit or not, we're skipping the if and the else. And this is the behavior that happens for both counter hit and not counter hit. And scrolling down a little bit more, we have this behavior right here. So what we were doing is determining what combo state the character was going to be in after receiving this hit. So we have a little bit of a priority order here. And we were checking to see if this hitbox causes daze, and if it does, setting the combo state to daze. Else, if it causes crumple, then setting it to crumple. Else, we were determining what type of stun it should be, if any. However, you'll notice that I put all this inside of an else statement now. And that's because I want to check for the air reset first. The air reset is more important in this case than daze and crumple or stun. Because if we are able to put the character into an air reset state, that means they are already launched, they're being attacked. In this case, we want to put them into air reset instead of trying to daze or crumple them while they're in the air, which shouldn't really be able to happen anyway. So what we want to do is actually make an if statement to determine if we can trigger the air reset combo state, and if we can do that, otherwise we'll go into the logic we had from the previous episodes. First things first, let's make an if statement where we check the combo state of the character. We check to see if they're already in the launched, ground bounce, or wall bounce state. Note that wall bounce is different from wall jump. Wall bounce is what happens when a character hits this character into the wall and they bounce off of it. So all of these are combo states, and any of these can lead into an air reset. So we check to see if the character that's taking damage is in any of the 3 possible states that we have currently to lead into air reset. If they are, we go into this if statement. Otherwise, we write else, and we take all the logic we had for the daze, crumple, and stun, and put it inside of that else. You don't have to add anything to this logic that we're putting in the else. It's all logic that already existed. We're literally just wrapping it in this else statement, so that we don't override the air reset state with something like daze or crumple. Because if the character is on the ground, this attack can cause daze or can cause crumple, but if they are launched and in the air, it should cause air reset instead. That's the important point here. Now going back to the if statement, once we know they're in one of the states that can lead to air reset, we want to make sure that this hit actually is intended to cause air reset. So if should cause air reset. And if it should, we want to set the combo state directly to air reset. Now, I also add a little bit of forces just to push the character up and to the right. This was just for the demo. We're going to make this cleaner because we need to take into account the direction, and also we should make these variables so that we can change how much the air reset pushes them. But what I'm doing is calling custom launch character and then passing in my forces. So 0 on the x-axis, 100 on the y, and 600 on the z. And then I'm overriding any other forces. Basically, push them up and to the right when they're performing the air reset. I think it looks a little bit nicer and more natural, and it allows them to reset and get a little bit of distance away from the attacker. Again, we are going to organize this and clean this up in a few minutes, but let's leave it like this for now just so we can see it in action. At this point, we can open up the editor again. Now that we're back in the editor, we can go to our data tables. And in the data table, the mute and hitbox data, or just any of your hitbox data tables, you can go in here and actually set your should cause air reset. So for me, I'm going to do it on my standard light attack that I test a lot of my logic in. So light attack hitbox 2, which is my strike hitbox, should cause air reset. I'm going to enable that. I'm going to save it. You can always modify these later or even during the middle of a match to test it out, but we just want this to cause air reset for now. Then I'm going to go over to my animation blueprint for the character that I want to add this to, or all my characters. Then once we get into the animation blueprint for the character, we need to go over our logic for the hitboxes as usual. So when we perform an attack in our game, we have these active hitboxes that go into the data table and actually spawn a hitbox with the exact data from the data table. In these cases, we call the create active hitbox function. In here, we pass along all the data from the data table. So we get our data table row from the hitbox data using the correct row name for the attack that the anim notify is. We break it to get all the hitbox data, and then we pass them along. So in this case, we now have this should cause error reset, and we want to pass that along. To do this, we'll need to click on our create active hitbox function and make a new parameter by pressing this button here. Then, when we make that new parameter, we can call it should cause error reset, make it a boolean, move it to the spot that we want on this function, then we can pass it directly from the break hitbox data into the create active hitbox. After doing that, we can go into the create active hitbox, and we'll see the parameter here. In this function, we have a set members and hitbox data. So essentially we spawn the actual hitbox actor, and then we want to set all the data that came in from the animation blueprint into this function. And we'll want to go to the set members and hitbox data and check the should cause error reset as pin here. That way it shows up as a variable in this node. Then we'll just want to pass the should cause error reset into the should cause error reset here. I've already done it, but you can see that I have the should cause error reset goes from the parameter list into this node. And now our active hitboxes will pass that parameter along. We should do this in one other spot as well, and that is the create projectile hitbox. You don't have to do it for the throw hitbox unless you have a throw hitbox that will actually trigger an error reset, but in my case I don't. So I want to go to create projectile hitbox, for example, and we'll go to one of the ones that we use all the time. Scroll down here. Let's use the homing thunderbolt that we love to use, which is this projectile that I can launch, and it tracks the opponent and their movement. So in here, I'm using my homing thunderbolt hitbox, and in this case, I have should cause error reset here, but the create projectile hitbox does not have that parameter. So I want to press plus new parameter, and we're going to call it should cause error reset, and we want to pass it up to the correct spot. Let's actually leave it right here, and then I will pass the parameter in from the break hitbox data. Now we go into create projectile hitbox, we have this new parameter, and so we want to pass it into this set members and hitbox data. To do that, we click on the node. We say should cause error reset checked as pin. Then we pass it along from the function into this node. And I like to clean it up a little bit, so I'm going to take the two nodes underneath of it, these reroute nodes, and I'm just going to add it here. And there you go. So now this projectile will actually be able to cause error reset. Great. And now we need a way to plan animation when we go into the error reset state. So we want to go to our state machine right here. And right now I have error reset only coming from launched, but you want to go from launch, wall bounce, and ground bounce. First things first, let's make a new state. So we can right click, add state, and I called this one error reset. Doesn't have any special events or anything like that. Let's go into it. I have this animation, mutant error reset version 2, and it's really just my forward roll, but I'm going to do it in the air, and I've also trimmed it so that it looks different than the roll. It looks a lot better in the air. So that's my animation. No anim notifies or anything required. Now going back to this state, I made sure that it doesn't loop. We only want to play it once, and I've determined the play rate that I want to play it at, but of course that will be different for your animation. Now we can leave the state, go back to the state machine, and we'll need to determine where we want to go to it from, and we want to go to it from launched, wall bounce, and ground bounce, as I mentioned earlier. So I have my launch state here, and I have a transition rule from that to error reset. All I check for in this is that the combo state of the character is error reset. we handle all that behavior in the code, so there's not much we have to do to make this happen. We just need to add this rule. So I grab my character reference, which is the owner of the animation blueprint, get the combo state, and then check if it's equal enum to air reset. And then if it is, we go into the can enter transition. Now, that is a good transition rule. You could add that to wall bounce and ground bounce, but I'm going to promote it to shared. So I'm going to hit promote to shared, and we're going to say air reset for the name. And this means I can just drag from wall bounce to air reset. I can then click on the wall bounce to air reset transition rule and use shared and select the air reset one we just made, and we'll easily be able to go from wall bounce to air reset. Last one we want to do this for is the ground bounce as well. So for me, ground bounce is right here. So we want to drag off of ground bounce to air reset. And we want to select the transition rule, and we want to use shared air reset. Now, none of these actually have any sort of transition events, so you don't have to worry about that. It's very simple. The only thing we care about now is how we exit air reset. So I just have it exiting from air reset back to idle when we land on the ground. So air reset to idle is this one right here. And for that, if we make a transition rule, we want to use our character reference again. We want to get the combo state, and we want to make sure it's reset to the default combo state or no combo state. So same rule as before, just make sure you have the no combo state option. And this should happen automatically when the character lands through our landed function with no changes required to make that work. Again, there are no transition events here. So it's very simple. We're just going to play that animation. We're going to apply the forces. The character is going to land, and they're going to return to idle. Now that is everything we need in the animation blueprint. So there's one other place we have to go, and that is the hitbox actor BP. So let's go back to our hitbox actor, this time the blueprint. We need to go to everywhere take damage is called and pass along that variable that we made. So in our check collision event, this is where we're determining if the hitbox collided with a character. If it did, and it was a strike hitbox, we were calling take damage. At this point, we want to pass along the data from this current hitbox into should cause air reset. Now, I renamed my variable, as you saw earlier, so it gave it a little bit of trouble, but I'm just going to remove that node, and we are all good to go. So hitbox data should cause air reset is right here, and I'm passing it along, as you can see, it's this one right here, into should cause air reset. So I'm just passing it from the data to the take damage function. And we'll want to do this for everywhere that we call take damage. So if I search take damage, Control F, then search for this, I can go to all these results and determine if I need to pass it in. This data right here is old data that I was using for debugging in the Discord. I'm actually going to get rid of it now because I've documented it separately. So I'm going to delete that logic. And now I'm going to search for take damage again. You'll see that I have 3 results. These ones right here are in my projectile collision logic. So if I scroll over, I have check projectile collision. In this event, we do a bunch of behavior to determine if we're actually hitting a character with this projectile. And if we are, we call it take damage. Well, same story here. We want to pass along should cause air reset into the take damage should cause air reset parameter. So we can do this for both of these options. And both those take damage will be good. And then the last one is the one we started this with. So we just pass should cause air reset into here, and we are good to go. Now, that is all the data passed along properly. So we can now trigger air reset if the character is launched, ground bounced, or wall bounced, and it should work. But as I mentioned to you earlier, I actually want to make this a little bit more convenient for us to use. So I'm going to scroll down to this custom launch character. So where we were triggering the launch for the character, we want to determine what direction they're facing before applying the forces. So we can say if is facing right, and if they are facing right, we want to use -100 because this is the y-axis, which is the horizontal axis in Unreal. So -100 is to the left, and if we're facing right and we're being air reset, we want to jump backward to the left. Else, we can use the same function, but use a +100 for our y value, or really whatever y value, just positive. The height can stay the same either way. Now, we can make this even one step better by changing these to variables. So if we go to our fighter template character, we can scroll down to our float variables. And here they are. We have a lot of variables here. Let's go to something like the distances and the heights. We're going to say the amount of air reset distance the character will have, and we're going to make it uProperty, edit anywhere, blueprint read write, with the category of movement. Then we'll say float air reset distance. Then we want to do the amount of air reset height the character will have, and we're going to make it that same uProperty, and I'm going to make it float air reset height. And because this is bothering me, I think distance should come before height. I'm going to move these two, the jump distance and the jump height. Don't worry about that. That's just me looking at this and trying to keep things consistent. But once I have these two new variables, we can now set them for each character. So characters can have different air reset distances and heights if we want. Let's go up to the constructor where we set all of our default values. I'll go below the jump behavior, which we have right here. And we'll say air reset distance equals, and we're going to use 100. That's the value that I'm using. And air reset height equals 600. Now I'm also going to change these values around so they match what's in the header file. Again, don't worry about that, just me trying to be consistent. So now my air reset values are set up. I can scroll back down to these launch characters, and instead of using 100, we can use negative air reset distance. And instead of using 600, we can use air reset height. Then for the else, we can use air reset distance and air reset height. There is one other thing that I like to do in this scenario. It's not technically required. However, when we are doing this custom launch character, we are overriding the forces. So whatever forces we add in this function are overridden by these two true booleans that we put at the end of the parameter list. Even though this works, other forces can be applied after the fact to change it, and lower down in this function, we call perform pushback, which actually applies forces as well. So if we are to go to this function, you will find that we are applying these forces, and these forces could change our air reset. It could affect that. And so I want to ignore that. So when we come into this function, we check to see if the character is blocked. And then in the else condition, we do all the logic related to actually performing the standard push amount and launch amount. In here, we only want to do this logic now if the combo state is not equal to the air reset. So this logic was already in here from previous episodes. So still go into the same else statement, still do the same logic. I'm just encompassing this is facing right behavior inside of another if statement. If combo state not equal to e combo state : e underscore air reset. And that will make sure that if we are in the air reset, we won't apply extra forces based on the move. We will have just applied the forces based on the air reset itself. Perfect. Now we can launch the engine again. Now that the engine is back open, I want to do one more thing in the animation blueprint. So if we go back in here, I'm actually going to add some entered and left state events in the air reset state. So if we click on this state, we have the states over on the right side here. And these are the state events. Typically, this is something I would like to do in code. However, I've already started the back-end work for switching the animation blueprint state machine to a lot of code logic. And because of that, I don't want to disrupt the flow by doing one part of it in code now and having to rework the rest later. It'll make it more confusing. So we're going to make it work perfectly functional in Blueprint, and then we will update this later when that episode comes out. Entered events are going to trigger when we enter this state from any condition. So if we go from idle to air reset, launch to air reset, wall bounce to air reset, or ground bounce to air reset, we're going to call the event that we put in that entered state event. The left state event is going to trigger anytime we exit air reset and go to another state. So in our case, when we go from air reset back to idle, we're going to trigger that left state event. I've called the top one, the end state event, enter air reset. And I've called the bottom one, the left state event, the exit air reset. The names don't really matter. You can call them whatever you want, and then we will just make sure that we find them in the event graph using those names. At this point, we want to go into the event graph of the animation blueprint, and we want to search for the event. So we're going to search for the first one, right-click, search for entered error reset. And once we search for this, we want to pick the event, and we'll get this node right here. Then, once we have the event, we want to basically just disable all of our hurt boxes except for the push box. The reason for this is because the air reset is an invulnerable state. So we don't want the character that is air resetting to be able to be hit by attacks or thrown. So we want to disable all of them except for the standard collision box, again, our push box. The way we can do this is by grabbing our character reference and calling the modify hurt box function that we made many episodes ago. This has a few parameters here to change the size, offset, and if the hurt box is enabled or not. Really, we don't care about all the other parameters except the index and the is active because we want to disable them and we want to make sure that we have the right indices. That way we don't disable the push box and we do disable all the other hurt boxes. For me and how I set it up in the series, the push box is always index 0. So we just want to go index 1 through 4 and make sure they're all inactive. So I call modify hurt box with is active to false on all 4 of them and use index 1, 2, 3, and 4. After this, we need to reset the hurt boxes once the character lands. And to do this, we're going to grab our exit air reset event. So we search for exit air reset, we grab the event. Then we want to grab the character reference and call reset hurt box, another function that we made earlier in the series. This will reset the hurt boxes all to their default value for when the character is in the idle state. Once we do all that, we can go ahead and play our game in practice mode to check out the hurt boxes. Then we can go ahead and launch our opponent. You'll see when they land, they have all the hurt boxes regularly. If we trigger an air reset on them, however, it's going to change. When they air reset, all their hurt boxes disappear except for the push box. Once they land and go back to the idle state, then they get all their hurt boxes back and we can deal damage to them like normal. We can go ahead and play this, and we should have good results. We should be able to trigger that air reset depending on the direction, and it will come out a different way. So let's skip everything, perform the air reset here, looks good. Let's perform the air reset on the other side, and looks good. So that is how you can implement air reset in your game. If you enjoyed this episode or any of my content, then please subscribe. It really helps me out a lot and it's completely free to do. If you'd like some assistance, there is a Discord community that you can join. The link is in the description. It is completely free. Thank you all so much who support the Patreon and YouTube membership. You guys are awesome and you keep this series alive. So week after week, these episodes are dedicated to you. Thank you very much. If you're interested in joining, you can click this link in the top right corner. Anyway, guys, that's all I got. So thank you so much for watching. I'm Shawnthebro, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye, guys.